Hi, I'm Kirti, and you are listening to the podcast By the Pulse. We bring you insights and analysis on issues that matter to the nation. Now, today we are going to discuss whether the exemption of GST on PPEs is a good argument or not. With several recommendations floated around from various stakeholders and politicians to exempt GST on items, namely ventilators, PPE, masks, test kits, sanitizers, and more, we talk about how counterproductive this idea could be. Not only won't it change the end consumer prices, but it would also disincentivize local manufacturing. Now, this podcast is going to be detailed and will be having in-depth analysis of GST and its benefit. To discuss this topic further, we have with us Mr. Nayan Sheth, who is a senior tax advocate and an expert in the field of taxation. Hello, Mr. Sheth. Welcome to the Pulse.
Hello.
Hello, sir. So, sir, recently there have been requests by various stakeholders to exempt GST on medical equipments like PPEs, masks, ventilators to combat COVID-19. Now, the government has clarified that this will not benefit the end consumer, but instead will increase the burden on the manufacturer. We would like to understand how valid is this argument, sir?
According to my opinion, the stand taken by the government is absolutely correct.
Okay.
The demand for exemption on GST is perhaps without understanding the intricacies of the GST law.
Yeah.
If I can elaborate basic fundamentals of the GST law, the GST is attracted on value addition.
Okay.
What the law provides is generally whatever inputs by way of goods or services are received on which you pay tax, you will get credit of that tax if you are paying tax on your supplies.
Okay.
There are very, very few exceptions where the input tax credit is not given. But they are the rare exceptions. In general, one would say that any tax paid on the receipt of goods and services which are used in the course or furtherance of business, the input tax credit is admissible of the tax paid on the receipt of such goods and services.
Okay.
Now, if on supply you are exempting the tax, which means that you are not paying tax on your supply, then the straight effect would be that the input tax credit would not be admissible.
Okay.
Which would amount to resulting into cost to the manufacturers to the extent of tax paid on inputs.
Okay.
Now, I can illustrate this by giving a very simple example. Supposing for a particular manufacturer, cost of the product is 100 rupees. And he is paying 20 rupees by way of GST on the receipt of these goods and services which he needs for the manufacture of a particular product. So his total cost is say 120 rupees. Now, supposing this manufacturer sells these goods at rupees 130 and let us presume that the tax on this product is 12%.
Okay.
So what he would be charging from the customer is 130 by way of sale price, 15 rupees 0.60 paisa, that is 12% by way of GST. When I say 12%, impliedly it means 6% as GST and 6% CGST. I'm putting it in a very simple terms.
Okay.
So the total sale price for the customer would be 145.60 paisa. Now, if we look at this, the cost of the manufacturer is 120. He is selling at 145.60 paisa, which means that he is gaining a profit of rupees 25.60 paisa. But apart from this, there is one another benefit to the manufacturer on the basis of the GST. The benefit is like this. As I had explained earlier, The tax paid on receipt of goods and services is 20 rupees. The tax charged on sale price is 15.60, which means that the tax on supply is less than the tax on imports by rupees 4.40. Now these 4.40, the manufacturer will get back from the government. This is either by way of refund or by way of adjustment towards the future liability. But definitely it would lead to reducing the cost of the manufacturer by 4 rupees and 40 paisa. Now, therefore, if you look it from a manufacturer's point of view, the overall profit that the manufacturer earns is 30 rupees. 25.60 by way of profit on the actual sale price and the actual cost, and 4 rupees and 40 paisa by way of gain from tax. That leads to 30 rupees by way of profit. Now, therefore, let us hypothetically presume that the GST is totally exempted by the government. And the manufacturer wants to earn the same profit which he was gaining when there was GST, which, as I explained earlier, the profit is 30 rupees. Now, therefore, if he wants to continue to earn profit of 30 rupees, what he would do is 120, as I had stated, is his cost price, to which he would add 30 rupees by way of profit. So his sale price would be 150 rupees. So when GST was 12%, he was selling at 145.60 and still gaining 30 rupees. And when GST is exempted, he would be gaining 30 rupees only if he charges 150 rupees from the customer. Which in other words mean that the price for the customer would get enhanced by 4 rupees and 40 paisa. Now this is one reason. Another reason which also needs to be kept in mind is there are many states which grants incentives to the manufacturers establishing industries in an industrially backward area of the state. Now such incentives are granted naturally for the state GST because the state does not have the legislative competence to give any exemption relating to the central GST, but it can very well grant incentives, and including Gujarat, there are many states where such incentives are given. Now, these incentives are based on the investment made by the manufacturer. Now, if the GST is exempted, these industry would lose these incentives because the incentives are granted based on payment of the state GST. If I pay 10 rupees by way of state GST, the government would grant me the incentives of 10 rupees. Now I would lose this 10 rupees. I don't think there is any logic from any angle to claim or suggest or recommend to the government that exempt GST on such products which are used for fighting COVID-19. It is without understanding the intricacies of law. If anyone is demanding, it is simply by not understanding as to how the GST law functions. So I would very clearly opine that it is never advisable to exempt GST on any product. Because it is only in case of zero rated supply, that is exports or sales to an SEZ unit or SEZ developer, that input tax credit is granted even if tax is not paid on supply. If I'm exporting goods, I don't pay tax by way of GST, and still I am getting the input tax credit because the law is so firm, because it is in the national interest to encourage exports and to enable the indigenous industry to compete with the foreign world. Therefore, accept zero rated supply. Input tax credit is not admissible if you are exempted on your supply, and therefore, as I had tried to explain by way of an illustrative example,
Yes.
it would lead to increasing the price of the product rather than decreasing the price if the GST is exempted on such products.
Correct.
Of course, there could be cases where the tax on inputs would be lesser than what I am explaining by way of an illustrative example. But even in that case, maybe the price may not increase, but it would not lead to benefit to the manufacturer.
Okay.
And on the other hand, the government would lose some revenue, which it is otherwise earning because of GST, and therefore I personally very clearly believe that it is never advisable to demand exemption from GST on any product.
Okay. Okay. So there are also concerns that, exempting GST would benefit importers, and a fear of, probably the substandard Chinese equipment will flood the market. So, sir, as an expert, can you break this down and, explain this argument?
Well, it is very simple. See,
Yeah.
at present, in view of the fact that in the initial stages, the government was finding that there was scarcity of these products because these products were not largely manufactured in our country.
Yes.
And there was a demand for these products. And in the circumstances, with a view to reduce the cost of these products when imported from outside the country, the government in its wisdom has exempted customs duties on these products.
Okay.
Now, therefore, the customs duty is exempted. So anyone selling from a foreign country, when it sells to an importer in India, that transaction does not attract any tax.
Okay.
Now, gradually we have started producing these products. If GST is exempted, as I explained earlier, it would lead to increasing the price of the indigenous products, which means that the cost of the goods produced in India will be more than the cost of the goods imported from outside the country. The natural effect is that any businessman would tend to import more rather than buying from within the country. Now, therefore, that would also have the effect of what problem which we are facing today for the kits which are imported from China.
Yes.
Where today there are grievances being raised about the quality of those kits.
Yes.
So there is great possibility that we get an inferior quality of goods only because the import is cheaper than the price of the indigenously manufactured goods.
Correct.
In other words, according to me, even from that angle, in order to see that the local manufacturers can stand in competition with the goods imported from outside the country, it is not advisable to tinker with the GST structure which is in operation at present.
Okay. So, sir, if there is, a strong and sound economic rationale of, not doing it, why does this argument of exempting GST on some goods keep coming back? I remember there was a similar misinformed campaign a couple of years ago on sanitary napkins too.
See, I understand that when anyone is demanding an exemption of GST on these products, they make such demand without knowing the intricacies of the GST law.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nayan sir, for coming on the Pulse and sharing some wonderful insights. This was a fantastic conversation, and we wish you luck for the future and hope that you remain safe.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. To all our listeners, let us know in the comment section below, how did you find our podcast? We would love to hear from you. Until we meet next, stay home, stay safe. Goodbye.